So there's an insidious relationship killer. It's something that we all value and we all try to live by. Unfortunately, prioritizing it in a relationship can end up destroying all of the bonds that you built together. In this video, I'm going to break down the difference between logic and emotion in relationships. I'm going to talk about why prioritizing logic is going to destroy your bond, and then I'm going to talk about how to prioritize emotion without removing logic altogether. So, logic. Logic is the silent killer in relationships, and emotion is the antidote. Now, this may sound very simple, but the power of emotional connection is crucial within relationships. And this sounds very obvious, right? It sounds very simple. But the truth is that most of us fall into the trap of logic without even realizing it. And this is having a massive impact on your connection with your partner. And worst of all, during tough times in relationships, we actually end up trying to rely on logic more than emotion, and it destroys all chances of reconnecting. So logic isn't just ineffective in relationships. It's oftentimes pretty destructive. A lot of people falsely think that logical communication, logical methods solve relationship problems. People think that if they can just explain things clearly enough, then their partner is going to understand and agree. But as you may have found, oftentimes this backfires and this creates a massive emotional disconnect. When you're responding to your partner's emotions with logic, you end up missing the point entirely. It's kind of like bringing a calculator to a poetry reading. It's the right tool for the wrong job and will ultimately cause the downfall of your relationship. So let's look at a real world example. Let's say your partner comes home upset about a conflict at work and you immediately start firing off logical solutions. You know, for example, have you tried talking to HR, or maybe you should just update your resume and get out of there. But what your partner really needs is emotional support and validation. So this logical approach leaves them feeling unheard and invalidated, even though the advice, technically, on a logical level, may be strong advice. That may be a good thing to do in that situation. However, you're bringing a calculator to a poetry reading. You're not actually digging into the relevant details in order to be able to provide the right support. So it's crucial to know that emotional communication isn't just nice, it's necessary for relationship survival. But ultimately, having these logical arguments like you shouldn't feel that way, or let's just focus on the facts, this creates emotional discords between yourself. They invalidate your partner's feelings and experiences, and it erodes trust and intimacy over time. So what is the massive difference between logical and emotional communication? Well, logic focuses on problem solving, facts, while emotional communication builds connection and understanding. So logic may fix a situation, but emotion repairs the relationship. You may have found yourself going into logic mode and pushing your partner further and further away, whereas the key to repairing that relationship is actually getting onto an emotional level, understanding the emotions and the emotional connection, how to build that rather than these logical ideas. So for example, you know, when a breakup starts to happen, guys can get into this habit of saying, oh, well, you promised that you were going to be with me forever. Well, why don't we stay together for the kids? Or this financial situation is going to be so difficult for us. This is logical reasoning. So when you're honoring emotional responses instead of trying to fix them with logic, you create a safe space for vulnerability and intimacy. But the damage from this goes deeper than you might think. Every time you respond with logic, you're unknowingly placing another brick in an invisible wall between you and your partner. Emotional safety is the bedrock of healthy relationships. This is the feeling that you can be completely open with your partner without fear of judgment or rejection. When it's there, your relationship thrives. Everything is overcomable. Everything can be solved, everything can be fixed, because you have the feeling of being able to express yourself. No matter how ridiculous it may feel to yourself or to your partner, you don't feel judged, right? And when emotional safety isn't there, or when it's damaged, everything starts to fall apart. And this is where logic becomes a wrecking ball. Every time you respond to your partner's emotions with facts, with logical reasoning, you end up chipping away at their sense of security. So you may think that you're helping, but you're actually sending a really powerful message. Basically, your feelings don't matter here. And there's so much research into this. If you think about John Gottman, who is one of the leaders in relationships, he has this theory about emotional bids, which is when a partner comes to you trying to connect on an emotional level. When you miss these bids or you shut them down with logic, you're rejecting a crucial opportunity for intimacy. And over time, this erodes trust and it creates a massive emotional chasm. And the long-term effects of this emotional neglect are devastating. Small issues escalate quickly and they create a lot of strain between you both. Without this emotional safety, partners stop turning to each other for support. The relationship becomes a hollow shell, devoid of that deep connection that once held it together. This is the glue to holding your relationship together. So it's really crucial to know that logic-driven responses create this wall of fear. The more that you rely on logic, the higher this wall becomes. Logic invalidates feelings, it misses opportunities for connection, and it creates a pattern of emotional neglect. In the end, it turns what should be a safe haven into a battleground of facts versus feelings. But why do we fall into this trap so often, especially as men? Why do we often fall into this logical, reasoning communication? Well, oftentimes we think that logic is just a trait. It's something that is biologically within us, right? But the truth is that the roots of men's logical thinking and reasoning aren't because of biology. It comes from culture. Understanding this influence is the key to transforming the way that you approach situations within your relationship. So we aren't born logical communicators, right? We aren't born with this gene of thinking logically and thinking reasonably. No, we're actually trained to be this way. So from a young age, as men, we are taught to suppress emotions very, very subtly. And there's the implication constantly pushed on us to prioritize rationality. You know, this whole idea that boys don't cry, it's not just a phrase, it's a cultural mandate that shapes how we express ourselves and how we look at the world throughout our lives. And this conditioning creates a massive internal conflict. You know, men have emotional needs just like every other human being on the planet. But what we don't realize is that we're trapped between these needs and the expectation to live our lives logically. And it ends up becoming trying to speak two languages simultaneously, one language that we don't even know exists, and it becomes exhausting. And the emotional impact of this is devastating. Suppressing these emotions becomes quite tragic in many, many cases. You know, there's a lot of research that shows that suppressing these emotions, not being able to fully dig down and understand our emotions, leads to increased anxiety and depression and ultimately tragedy in men. And it's not just about mental health, it disrupts our ability to form deep emotional connections. And this is creating a huge barrier in relationships. You know, oftentimes I get men coming to me to start to try to fix their relationship, and they don't even understand why their partner is on the way out right now. And once they realize the simplicity of how the relationship broke down and how to repair it, it becomes a lot easier. But it's such a shame for us to get to that place in the first place. Because not being able to understand deeply emotions on a connection level creates a huge barrier in our relationships, and it leaves men and women and everyone in between in every relationship feeling isolated and misunderstood within the relationship that should be their source of joy. We end up becoming scared to be vulnerable, and this makes it even harder to engage in emotionally intimate conversations, and it creates a vicious cycle. This fear of emotional expression leads to more logical communication. We build these walls up around ourselves, right? Which means that when we do express ourselves, we express them in a toxic way, which creates more toxicity within the relationship, which erodes the emotional safety even further. You know, there's this historical idea that men are viewed as protectors and providers, and this societal role emphasizes this rational decision-making over emotional engagement. And this deeply ingrained pattern doesn't just disappear overnight, even in the modern world. But we often default to these logical ideas, and it becomes a perfect storm of cultural conditioning, emotional suppression, and this historical hangover, right? Men aren't choosing logic over emotion. We are trapped in a pattern that we've been taught our entire lives. So to break out of it can be really, really difficult. But it's really important to be able to break out of it, because not only does it help ourselves, but it also helps every single relationship we're in. Whether you're a gay man, straight man, bi, whatever it is, every relationship that you have is impacted by not learning emotions on a deep level. But it's not all doom and gloom. The good news is that you can change this. You can learn this. And it's not going to be easy, but it is simple. And the impact on your relationship and on yourself will be transformative. So what are some strategies to bridge this emotional gap and learning to start shifting from logic to emotion? And just to be clear about this is not about choosing one or the other. There is situations where logic is essential. There are situations where emotion is essential. There are situations where understanding both at the same time is crucial. So it's never just picking one or the other. As a guy, if you learn emotions, it doesn't mean that you're just going to become this sobbing mess, although you can do. It's about learning a new tool. So I want to dig deeper into more practical strategies in order to learn emotions so that we have this extra tool under our belt. And just before I move forward onto this, you know, learning and building these tools is not just going to be something that you do for a couple of weeks or a couple of months. This is something that will be constantly built on over time. Learning this will not only benefit yourself, but it'll benefit any relationship that you're in. And that's what a lot of my members have found, is that learning these tools is not just a one and done. This is about building a tool set over time and learning to master them. One of my members who was going through a tough time in his relationship spoke about how much these tools have had an impact on the relationship with his parents. He feels closer than ever to his parents. And as a result of this, he actually reconnected with his mum, and they're taking a trip together. So this has a massive impact on your entire life. Learning relationships, learning emotions, communication, and relationships is one of the best tools that you can do. And I'm sorry if I get quite passionate about this, but it's not something that is taught in school. And it should be, because it has a massive impact on everything. So mastering relationships is one of the best things that you can do, because it has an impact on every part of your life. And if you do want to join the members and I, then join me on my relationship bootcamp, where you'll learn the same steps and tools that all of my members use to start turning their relationships around, and you can too. Just click on the link in the description to grab your spot. So emotions aren't just a soft skill. It is the bedrock of lasting relationships. So there are three main skills that are going to start to revolutionize how you connect with your partner. So the first is emotional intelligence. Now, a lot of us guys can think that we already have this. We can be like, yes, she's mad at me. She wants me dead. We have this very simplistic idea of understanding emotions. But emotions is more than just being able to point out that someone is mad. It's about understanding the reasoning as to why they would feel upset. It's about understanding the reasoning about how we feel mad, how we feel upset, how we feel sad, how we feel hopeless. It's the ability to recognize, understand, and manage your own emotions while also being attuned to your partner's feelings as well. And this skill is essential for creating and maintaining emotional safety, which, as we spoke about earlier, is the foundation of any healthy relationship. So the next skill is active listening and validation. Shifting from logical to emotional communication isn't easy. It requires rewiring deeply ingrained habits and stepping out of your comfort zone. But the payoff is massive, which is a deeper, more fulfilling connection with your partner. Next is expressing vulnerability and clearly stating your needs, using I feel statements. So with these three strategies, we can start shifting from logic to emotion, to actually building connections and building trust with other people, including our partner or ex-partner. Shifting from logic to emotion will help to build your toolkit. But don't stop there. Mastering your emotions is about being able to use them to your advantage. I've actually done a deeper dive into this, which I'll link to on the screen, which is about emotional alchemy, which is about taking difficult situations, understanding your emotions, and being able to shift that energy into positive situations, turning it into a situation where you actually end up thriving rather than just surviving. But in order to do this, you need to master your emotions. So I'm going to leave you with that deeper dive video into emotional alchemy, and I'll see you over there.